Hey everyone, welcome to 3 Bookworms 1 Pod, where we do weekly analysis and reviews on our favorite books.
Yeah, that's right. And on this episode, we're actually going to be talking about Daytripper. So that's an award-winning graphic novel released back in 2011. Now, to those who don't quite know this book, it's actually a novel which follows Brass, a writer, as he goes through fragmented sequences of his life, accomplishing some goal or purpose, only to die a really gruesome death after each chapter.
Today we will be discussing and analyzing chapters 1, 5, and 10 in particular.
Now, if this sort of premise interests you, we highly suggest to go and check it out because it is a pleasure to read. Do keep in mind, however, that in order to fully enjoy and understand Daytripper, you have to read the entire book. This might turn off some people, but we promise you that it is worthwhile.
So let's start. So chapter 1 starts off with a few obituaries that Brass wrote, abruptly cutting to him at a bar with blood splattered all over him and the counter. Out of nowhere, he finds comfort in his realization that people die every day regardless if he writes about them.
That's so messed up.
Yeah, I actually thought it was like a hitman or something when I first saw the page. Like one of those, is it one of those novels again, you know? Anyway.
So right after that, the setting switches to a park where he's reading the newspaper and he sees that the day is the day of a ceremony that's celebrating his father's writing career. But on that same day is his own birthday, which his father probably forgot about. While walking home from the park, his mom calls him and asks if he knows about the ceremony, but she also forgets to greet Brass for his birthday.
Oh, that's gotta hurt, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just happens once a year, right? Can you just remember that?
Right after that, he does get home and then he's clearly upset by his parents, who forgot about his birthday, and he tries to forget them for a few moments, and he, ironically writes on the typewriter that his dad gave him, and he smokes cigarettes, which is a habit that he actually picked up from his mom. And
Right.
Right after that, it skips to the next day where he's in the office writing obituaries again, but this time, you can see how he emphasized how those people that he wrote about were great fathers. And then, in the middle of his writing, he gets interrupted by his best friend, Jorge, who I like very much as a character because he's like a really genuinely caring and friendly guy. He then invites Brass to go out for some coffee, and then they talk about the ceremony and laugh about some stuff, until Jorge brings up the book that Brass was planning to write. And then Brass admits that he was actually dodging writing the book because he felt like his life was getting too hectic. And you can see that Brass was feeling quite old there. When he brings up, in his own words, life was simpler, or at least when I thought life was simpler, easier. And I'm sure that the three of us, even at 17 years old, can relate to what Brass said here and, recall how life was simpler even back then when we were way younger.
Yeah, true. Actually, it definitely feels a lot like that. Like now you've got so much responsibilities and all of that. So I don't know. I guess it's just part of it.
Everything's going so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then after that, he talks about how he thought that he was going to live life to the fullest in college with Jorge and write about it later in life. But then he says, all I write about is death, which is referring to his job writing the obituaries.
I mean, that's pretty sad.
I mean, at some point you gotta pay the bills, I'm guessing.
And right after that conversation, Jorge leaves because Brass has to call his partner Anna about the ceremony, which she can't attend because of her delayed flight. And Anna insists on Brass going to the ceremony even if she can't make it herself. After this, Brass is, clearly sad, and he walks over to his desk and finds a letter from Jorge, who's the second person here who remembered his birthday. And the letter reads, the young open the paper to forget about life by reading the funny strips. The old do it to forget about death by reading other people's obits. My advice, don't open the paper and go on with your life. This part of the chapter was really striking and inspiring for me personally, because it serves as a reminder that life is something to be enjoyed and celebrated, and not really something to forget or distract ourselves from. And the same does go for death. It's something inevitable and to be accepted, but we shouldn't let it hinder us from going on with our own lives.
Yeah, Daytripper really frequently actually brings this point up, and we're gonna see this in the other chapters on how we really have to enjoy life. It's,
And right after that, the next page cuts to Brass standing outside the municipal theater, thinking about how the Great Hall had been echoing with fathers and sons from the very beginning. But then he abruptly leaves looking for a pack of cigarettes, when he stumbles into this bar that's named Gennaro. After that, Brass talks with the bar's owner and asks if he's the Gennaro that the bar is named after. And that guy explains that he's the son of Gennaro, and he only inherited the bar. He says that people even call him Gennarino, which literally means Little Gennaro. After that, Brass says that, he could have changed the bar name, but Gennarino tells him that in the end, it would still be his father's bar, and he would still be known as his father's son. Brass brings up the fact that we're all somebody's son, and Gennarino adds to that saying, we just don't get to choose our family.
Oh yeah, actually this kind of reminds me because like I think like one of the biggest like themes, right, in this story, it's kind of like about it's kind of like about identity, right? And so in some way this sort of thing is like a crucial part of his identity. He sees is like from his dad, right? He even like shares a name and all of that. And so that's sort of like a part, I guess, it's like inescapable, or it's like a thing that we already have from the very start. Something like that. That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it really tries to tell us how like family is like just actually a part of us, how it makes us, and how even when we don't get to choose it, like it's something in our legacy already.
Yeah, exactly.
Right after they share that conversation, out of nowhere, Gennarino's nephew Yoka enters the bar with a gun and asks his uncle for money that he needs. And Yoka brings up how his mother doesn't care about him. And right after that, he suddenly shoots his uncle in the face.
Shoot, man, that's where things got dark, I'm guessing. But like at the same time, it's like another thing about it is that it's sort of like a reversal, I guess, of what Gennaro said, because like so you're born with this family and they and you're like with them for like the whole time, but what happens if they're actually like not nice to you? Like what's gonna happen then, I guess.
Right after Brass witnesses that, he asks Yoka why he shot his uncle. And Yoka says, you don't choose family. Repeating that the words that Gennarino said just a while ago. And right after that, Yoka suddenly shoots Brass in the face. Overall, I feel like this chapter speaks a lot about identity by showing how much we inherit the legacies of our parents. And, even our parents define who we are, which we can see in both Brass and Gennarino. When Brass is typing on the typewriter that his father gifted him, or smoking the cigarettes which is a habit that he picked up from his mother. And Gennarino when he picked up the bar from his dad.
Yeah, actually, there's a thing, like somewhere in the middle of the chapter, he says that he wants to like forget those habits that he got from his mom and his dad.
Yeah.
And like I think that's another like crucial part of like identity, is like it's like remembering stuff that happened in the past, so that you like have a foundation to base yourself on, right? So and I kind of find it really interesting that he actually like writes about obituaries, because in some way I think like he says that even if he doesn't write, people will keep on dying. But then in some way, I guess the reason why he keeps doing it is because he wants to sort of like record these people's lives and like history and stuff. So it's like if nobody ever like talks about them or something, like who knows what kind of people they were, right? Like they're not like really famous or anything. So this is sort of like his sort of like way of like commemorating them, I guess, and cementing.
Sort of like he takes it upon himself,
Yeah, exactly.
to like try and give them like an identity, from
or cementing
their
their identity as like people who existed, like this guy did something, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that also the quick and brief death of both Brass and Gennarino here are somewhat like metaphors, literally, for the transience of life. Because they die so fast and so
Yeah,
sudden.
exactly. It was like
It's funny how you mentioned this actually, because I think this is something that's definitely gonna come up in like the chapters that we're actually gonna discuss.
right.
And
Yeah,
it's just so prevalent in Daytripper.
exactly.
Yeah. So what about you, Cax? What chapter did
Oh,
you read?
mine was the fifth one. So actually, he's a kid here, which is like because like for four whole chapters, we've like seen him as like an adult, and suddenly like he's just 11, right?
Yeah. I think that's actually more relatable to us than the others.
But yeah, but we're more adults than kids at this point.
Technically, yeah, in some way. But like at least we've experienced being kids already, right? So anyway, what happens here is yeah, Brass is about 11. He tells a story of how he was born. So you'll recall in chapter 1, his mom, his mom calls him my little miracle, right? But there's actually a more personal reason for that. Because like when he was born, there was like a citywide blackout, and what happened was he was like one of the only people who wasn't like scared, and he was so happy that quote he was like he lit up like a star, and somehow the blackout went away. So it's really like the imagery is really powerful, like the interplay of like light in the darkness,
Yeah.
right? And he's telling the story to his cousins, and they're on their grandparents' ranch. It's a really big family, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins.
Yeah, funny how you mentioned that, because like that's also a really big thing in Filipino culture, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, like Filipino and Brazilian culture, they probably share that. I'm guessing. Like extended families are really common. We have lots of those relatives and stuff. So he remembers his time there fondly, describing it as fun, filled with life, and is always being something to appreciate. Even amidst like the danger or something. And I guess it's pretty interesting to note that his view of life is like more innocent, more positive here, and definitely all of the disillusion from the previous chapters is gone.
Yeah, definitely way different from the first four chapters.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And he says this like all like the dishes that they have there, the trees, even the animals, they all have names in that farm. And I think this ties back to the theme of identity, because like naming, it's absolutely essential to giving something an identity, which is like it's like by giving like say like the chickens a name, they're not just a chicken, but they're like somebody that's like that they have like a unique marker that just points to only that particular chicken, and in that way, I guess Brass comes to look upon them as like kind of part of their family.
Yeah, kind of like Gennarino.
Right,
that early
exactly,
chapter. In the first chapter, was named after his dad. Yeah.
And actually, that's another thing that I kind of remember, because what I remember is that naming is also kind of like a way of either exerting power over something, or maybe like projecting the namer's perspective on it. Because like I remember like from the Bible, for example, Adam is given like the task of giving everything in the Garden of Eden names, right? And so it's sort of like projecting his point of view on like all of those like trees and plants and stuff. And even like later on, the story of Jacob. So Jacob wrestles with his angel, and they both, no one seems to be like winning or losing. At the end of it, God comes down to him and he says, I will now be naming you Israel, which means contended with God. And I think in some way it's kind of like God telling him like, this is the most important event of your life, and I want to associate like myself forever with you whenever people say your name, kinda, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Right.
it's really interesting actually how you say that, because when we're named, it's most frequently from either higher ups, but
Yeah.
more frequently from friends, family.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a two-way relationship. Like your friends will kind of project how they view you
Yeah.
to your name, and how that projection you kind of take it up to.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird two-way relationship
Yeah, or
that
like-
really just.
Or like even when they like give you like nicknames, even if that's not your real.
Oh yeah, definitely, exactly,
Yeah.
nicknames. Yeah.
It's kind of like you have a different identity with your family from with your friends.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but despite all those different identities, it still makes you.
Yeah,
You know?
it still points to you.
That's like your real identity.
Exactly. So yeah, and Brass's dad, Benedito, has this like huge tree that he sits by, and it's named after his muse. I'm guessing it's like his wife, Ata. So Aurora. So in some way, I guess he's associating the tree with the thought of her. So it's not just a tree; it's a tree that reminds him of her. I'm guessing. So I guess it's like sort of like him imposing some new meaning on something that he can more readily connect with. Is what I'm guessing. So anyway, yeah, he tells Brass about the scarcity that they experience on the ranch because like even with all the things that he's enjoyed, they have like limited water supply, so he can't go like wasting them all the time. And but like writing while on the toilet is like a big thing, and and Benedito's a writer, so when he writes he only picks out the most important ideas so that when he goes to the toilet he can write about them. So what does that remind you of?
I don't know, like what?
I got no clue.
I don't know. Well, I mean, probably a lot of different things, but I'd say it's probably a little bit kind of like life, because water is a symbol of life, so maybe it fits, right? It's precious, but it's scarce, so we have to like make the most out of it so we can enjoy it best. And even in scarcity, like even in his ideas, there's also scarcity. I guess it's like a callback to chapter 1, where like when Brass himself is like thinking, like, why do we always seem to remember the most trivial things in our lives, but we seem to forget the most important ones, something like that. So I guess his dad is trying to like be like one step ahead of that by picking only the most important ideas that he has. Or maybe from like a socio-economic lens, maybe it's really just about scarcity in general. Like like there's so much like inequality in resources and stuff, and most likely Brass's family had that, but from his innocent viewpoint, he manages to ignore it as a child, I guess.
Yeah, I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes to show how precious our life is. We have so little resources, but we have to use all of them in order to really make something out of the really short time we have.
Yeah, and I think it also like forces us to like figure out what's really important at the same time. So yeah,
definitely.
So yeah, over time living at that ranch, the seasons change and all of that. So summer becomes rainy season. Also, Brass's mood changes, and one day he comes to a shocking realization. He understands that for the first time, that people grow up. His mom will one day be like his grandma. His peers will one day become adults and do like more adult things, probably less innocent things, and that changes him forever. I mean, to be honest,
Yeah, go on.
the way I came across that concept was kind of like in reverse. So I didn't think about like, oh, I'm gonna get older, but it was more like the people that I grew up with were once young like me, and they probably had the same aspirations. They probably got in this, they were probably like students as well. They got in the same mischief as me or something like that. And eventually, like for example, my grandparents, they were once adults too. They probably had like thoughts about romance before they settled on each other, and they probably like had ambitions and stuff about what they wanted to do before they became parents. I don't know, I guess it's like when I see their old pictures, it sort of like gives me a window into how it must have been like in the past. So, God willing, one day I might be like them.
Yeah, I hard relate so much when you said like you just see the people around you getting like getting younger or like older. Like I remember like going to like my grade 7 building
Yeah.
back when it was still physical classes, and like seeing the places I used to play and seeing like more new people that I've never seen, and it just really makes me feel so old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Even
like-
if we're young.
It's like there are so many like celebrities now that are kind of like the same age as me, something like that, or kind of close to it. It's like,
Yeah, they're
ooh.
way more successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, basically that. One day, Brass goes out, playing hide and seek with his buddies. He goes under the tree named after Aurora with this one girl, and they share a kiss there really quick. But I guess that sort of experience tends to stay with him. So eventually they have to leave, but for some reason he knows that life is never gonna be the same again. Although he says that leaving is never sad because they can always go back next week, and I guess it's kind of like reflective of the sort of mentality that we have when we're kids, that like we don't even think about death because it seems like so far away. It's like it only happens to like really old people, and like we're basically like immortal in a sense. I don't know. Does that really make sense?
I mean, yeah, I get that's youth. We are so caught up in our little bubble that our parents create for us that we don't really think about the future. Just think of the present. But actually, something I'd really like to point out here is that when the kiss that Brass did, that only happened because he realized that people do get old. He realized the reality of death, and it kind of acted as a motivator.
Yeah,
for him
or
to
like
do
growing
this.
up in general, I guess maybe.
Oh yeah, growing up
Yeah.
in general. So like he kind of uses it as it kind of acted actually as a motivator for him to do stuff that he wouldn't really normally do, to
Right.
live his
Exactly.
life.
Yeah. So he goes back home, and then the next day he's full of life and determined to experience it the best that he can. And so he's like, running around in the streets, flying a kite under, telephone poles and bundles of electric wires. You can see where this is going. The narration ends kind of ironically, calling back to the thing about brass being, the light in the darkness. Guess that also applies quite literally when you've got like a million sparks flashing out of you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was so. It was so hard to read.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is. After 4 chapters of the disillusioned older brass, I think this is a pretty welcome change to how we would approach the same questions in childhood. But given that age, we know when it's gonna end, right? Because it's early.
Yeah.
So yeah. Wait, what about you, Matt? What was your chapter like?
Well, all right. So from the past 2 chapters, at least that we've reviewed, we've seen Brass at his younger years, youthful, and his more so disillusioned self. But chapter 10 actually starts off with a much older Brass getting an MRI scan. So the brain thing. So the
Right.
doctor reveals he has some sort of unknown mass in his brain. Something if not treated ahead of time will probably lead to Brass's death. Now we don't really know what it is. It could be cancer or something, but it's just a really lethal disease, right? And so weirdly enough, once he's heard this life-changing information, he just shrugs it off and just leaves. And he just tells the doctor that, okay, yeah, I'm satisfied with the life I've lived, and whatever side effect I'm gonna have, I'll just take it. I'll just refuse my treatment.
Damn. I think it's I don't know, I think at that point he says something like he isn't really looking forward to anything anymore because he's already lived his life, all of the stuff that we've seen in the previous chapters. Since he's an old guy, he must have already survived all of them. So he has so much experience, I'm
It's
guessing.
like he's no longer afraid of death because
Yeah.
he's done with life. He's completed it.
Yeah. So then after that, actually, he goes home and is greeted by his equally elderly wife, Anna. So that was actually the partner that Paolo talked about in chapter 1. So we really weren't able to cover her in this episode more in depth, but let's just say that Brass meets her in the other chapters and eventually marries her. So they both share some pleasantries, before Brass tells her that he no longer wants to proceed with the treatment. And like a good couple, they just hug it out, and it's so weird. I just find that so crazy. One of my biggest fears growing old, and especially dying to mental causes, and they just don't care. They really just appreciate the time they have together. They hug it out and they just talk about life like nothing bad just happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, but more on that later.
Yeah, that's a really cute moment. It actually reminds me of my grandparents.
Yeah, definitely. And then after this conversation, their now grown-up son Benjamin comes over to check on his dad. So unfortunately, again, we didn't really talk about Benjamin in the past chapters, but all of that's really important is that that's Anna's and Brass's child. So they both exchange conversations about family, life in general, and it ends with Benjamin giving Brass a letter from the latter's own dad, so Brass's dad, and this was addressed to him several years ago, really long time. So yes, this is actually the same dad which was present in chapter 1 and 5, the one chapter 1 when he was a really successful writer, and chapter 5, when he was under the tree, just doing his own writing.
Yeah, exactly. It's Benedito, right?
Yeah. So, and then after a while, Brass actually opens the letter and finds him reading, the same letter that's, addressed to him several years ago. I think it was given to him, supposed to be given to him, at the time
When
at the
Benjamin was
time
born,
frame.
right?
Yeah, when Benjamin was born. Yeah, exactly. So it's a super long time ago, and when he reads it, Brass's father actually writes towards him regarding the joys, sorrows, and responsibilities of being a parent. Something that Brass has already gone through since he's super old by the time he got it. But an especially thought-provoking line that comes from this is, you'll surrender your life to him. Give him your heart and soul because you want him to be strong, to be brave enough to make all his decisions without you. So when he finally grows older, he won't need you. That's because, one day you won't be there for him anymore. Only when you accept that one day you'll die can you let go and make the best out of life.
That's really sad. I always cry whenever I read that.
Yeah.
And it also like neatly ties in both of the themes, right? Both of like identity and transience, because like in some way your identity is also in some way like your role in life. Like if you're a
Agree.
kid, then you're a kid. If you're a dad, then you're playing this
Mm.
role for a kid. If you're a granddad, then you're playing that role, that role as well. But your role will always be changing, and eventually there's gonna be a time when you'll have to leave that role behind and pass it on to someone else.
And the cool interplay is that like exactly in this letter he says that you can't really live out that role. You can't really live out that identity without accepting that death is just right around the corner. So like it kind of just like shows the relationship that both concepts have. Can't have one without the other. So yeah, again, this is a really sad line, and it really spoke to me because death is something that you know that is, at least for me, is scary. But despite it, we have to really accept it in order to live our best life. This is one of our main motivators. Just like what I said in chapter 5. And in order to excel and to push ourselves, we really have to accept it as something that is eventually gonna happen. And I really feel like this line sums up this lesson, and like just like what Kak said, the main theme of the book, in a very simple and beautiful way. So the chapter ends with Brass reading the letter, and then after excusing himself from his and Anna's bedroom because it was really late at that time. Brass walks towards the sea with the letter in hand, and the book ends. So it's yeah, the ending is super abrupt. It's out like there's so
It's kind of
much
open
speculation.
ended. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those like the really abrupt endings, and like there's so many questions. But like before I start like analyzing and whatever, really neat detail that I found was it's actually a type of callback present in chapter 1, and it happens again in chapter 10. So at the beginning of chapter 1, when Brass was still disillusioned, and he was writing obituaries. One of the obituaries that he actually wrote was about a famous soccer player, at least when he was in his prime, and that person's name is Olivia Tata, I
I
think.
think it's Otavio.
Otavia. Okay,
Yeah.
my bad. Sorry. It's a weird name. So his final words actually to his wife were, "I think I'm going to sleep in late, dear," which funny enough are almost exactly the same words which Brass says when he um excuses himself from Anna and walks towards the sea. So no, we may really not know what his true fate was, but this callback it might just like allude or like hint that he suffered the same fate as the soccer player. But again, you never really know.
And the
So
fact that it's like such a like a peaceful like it's like a peaceful line. It's like there's no hint of what's to come, I guess. Actually, wait, there was a really interesting thing that I also noticed because like at the very start, one of the other obituaries that not the soccer player but another guy, a sort of a UN official or something, and his name was Machado. And the thing about that is that there's actually a Brazilian author from like the early 20th century named Machado de Assis, and he made this novel entitled Brás Cubas, as in like brass, like the protagonist of the story. Wait, Paolo, right? You read about it. Like, what's that book about?
Yeah, yeah. So the actual complete title is The Posthumous Memoirs of Bras Cubas, and it's about this guy in his coffin looking back on his life, on his death. And it's funny because in the ending of this book, he says that so Bras Cubas, the dead guy, he says that he feels successful in life because he didn't have a son. So kind of like the opposite of Brass in this book. So he says that he didn't pass on the suffering and pain of life to his son. So it's kind of like a success. So it's like a pessimistic version of this last chapter.
That's
I would
pretty
say
dark.
the exact opposite of Daytripper, but like again, it's like a really cool illusion.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I guess the whole thing about like revisiting your life after you die many times, kind of like sort of, not exactly the same, but they're kind of related, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So all I'm gonna say is that actually I cried during this portion because it really spoke to me. So like I have a really deep bond with my parents. So reading that letter and reading that line talking about the main goals of the parents, it really made me realize how it's like naturally a part of a parent's responsibility to like surrender your soul, in order for your child to grow, and it hurts all the more learning this fact when you know that in like past years, you've done things that really hurt your parents, and it just makes you regret so much, and like it's something I really regret before.
Yeah, actually, it's a it's a really sad but also really like heartwarming chapter at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. I can relate.
Yeah. So, and besides this, actually, I would like to go back to the whole theme of death, specifically in this chapter. So, like right now, I'm just like getting into it. So, while the other chapters actually highlight death as something which reminds us that we're fleeting, this chapter paints death as something to be embraced. Actually, so it is portrayed as a motivator, similar to chapter 5.
Yeah.
So something to be wary of but not feared. And well, we were talking about death as a motivator, like in a what call this, like in an analysis like level. Once we finally analyzed it, but in this chapter, it just plainly showcases that wait, sorry. It just plainly shows that how Brass and his father, they saw death not as a concept to be feared, but as a driving force to live one's best life. It just on the nose, just like showcases it that, hey, like we should really be using this as a motivator in order to like do the most we can. So this force, it drives them to make every moment count and to live life to the fullest. So in a way, it sort of hammers in the concept of transience. So again, we're going back to transience and how we as human beings are fleeting. And even though we've repeated this, many times, the chapter, however, says that, hey, that's completely fine. It's okay if we're fleeting. It's okay if we're gonna die in like a few years because of this transience, we have a purpose. We can be encouraged to make the most of our short time.
Right.
Our each and every one of our actions, will have an impact, and I think that's what gives us purpose in life.
Makes sense.
So yeah, and then so other than death, the chapter also talks about identity, and just like the other chapters, it talks about how family affects our identity. So in this chapter and the ones before it, like a common line that's thrown around is we carry our family inside of us. It's who we are. So in a way, the chapter tries to show us how family and the people we value all have a part in shaping who we are. And yeah, I believe that it's something I really have to take into consideration. Something that like I think I could take away that we didn't really discuss in the other chapters is that there are moments that we feel really alone in our suffering. So like when we feel like we can't really ask for help and we can't really like express our pain towards others because we don't really want to bother them, and at the same time, if they do like go to us, it doesn't really feel like they're suffering with us. There's always a barrier that's like preventing them from really reaching out. So there's just sometimes when you feel like you're alone in your suffering. But when I read this chapter, when I realized that we're all made out of like the experiences and like the memories and the teachings that our loved ones and our family members have given to us, it just kind of makes me feel like we're never really alone. We always have those lessons in us, deep in our soul, deep in our identity. And I understand that many people have like different family situations, and not everybody may have like the best time with their parents, but I mean that's the beauty of family. It's like it's something that can go past blood, and I think our loved ones, our friends, they
Oh,
also
yeah.
count, and they also make us who we are in a sense.
Yeah, and also like the fact that we have like the choice like to decide what we want to do about, like for example, if our like our family, like whether we're going to accept them or whether we're going to find family somewhere else is it's totally going to be up to the person, and it's going to be part of that person's identity as well. So everyone has their own unique experience, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, this book was so good. But so with that, we've gone through 3 of our favorite chapters in Daytripper. Yay! So how did you guys find the novel?
Well, I think it was really brilliant. There's like a lot of deep lessons that I think will remain long after our first reading. I want to like go through it again like more intensively somewhere in the future. To be honest, there's so many other different moments from other chapters that I really wish I could talk about, because like one cool thing about it somehow manages to make a cohesive story even though he dies after every chapter. Like for example, he definitely drowns in chapter 2. Chapter 3 sort of continues as if he never did, and so like but because each chapter shows a different age, we get to see him come through different like stages of realization about life throughout those different eras.
Yeah, and it's really funny how you mentioned water because it's something that he always goes back to.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
he drowns in chapter 2 in water. Then
The final
at chapter
image.
10, yeah, the final moment he goes back to the water, and like yeah, it's just a really cool symbol. Yeah,
Sort of like
that's-
he just sort of accepts it, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool because they were able to make such a really nice graphic novel, even if the events aren't chronologically organized. But it still tells a really nice story, and slowly you can piece together what's happening in Brass's life and what he's learning from the other chapters. When he dies.
Yeah. I can definitely tell though that when this was still like a weekly release because this was a weekly release before it got
Oh.
packaged into like a big book. I can just imagine how confused the people were when they were reading this. Like, okay, what's the point? He just keeps dying and dying.
Yeah. Or like maybe after the first issue, he was like, "Well, it's done, I guess. What else are you gonna do about it?"
yeah.
But then he's back in the second.
But yeah, despite all of that, the story was still so engaging, and
Right.
I think I really enjoyed it. So yeah.
What about
So,
like?
do you guys? Okay.
But like,
Go
I don't
on,
know about like Brass himself as a character, like as a person. What do you guys think about him? Or what do you think he's like?
Well, I mean, I think he's a dreamer. He's never satisfied with like his like situation, at least until the very end.
Yeah.
He always wants to be more than what he is. Like he's already he's already like a pretty well-known writer. Writing obituaries. Many people have read his things and have thanked him really.
Yeah.
But he wants to be more. He wants to be a better author. He wants to have a family. Wants to be a better person. And I think that's really respectable. He wants to accomplish things that more so than the average Joe.
Yeah. I mean, even after, even in the later chapters where he's like already a successful author, there's always still something to like look forward to that I guess is cut short. But yeah, I think so that yeah, he is a dreamer, but at the same time, he's always facing reality. Sometimes he gets something good from it, and sometimes not.
Yeah, like it's like in the first chapter where he didn't want to work on his book because he was focused on his job and personal life. But I think that's that actually stems from I think his fear of death in
Right.
that first chapter.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, besides that, I would say like he's like willing to like change, willing to grow, and I don't really know. There's a word. I promise. There's a word for that. It's at the tip of my tongue, but like I don't really
Like
know what it
evolve?
is.
I don't know.
I mean, no, not like there's a quality. There's a quality, but like I just don't remember. But like yeah, back to my point. We can see him change a lot from the start of the novel. He begins his life annoyed by death, something so something to be feared. Like he just wants to get away from it. He just wants a family. He wants to live a life. He's trying to push away the notion like to the very last moment.
Right.
But at the end, once he's lived his life, once he's really appreciated his life and accomplished his like goals, he's accepted the reality of death and he realizes the importance of it. And also, his love for his parents. At the start, he really didn't appreciate them, but at the end, he starts talking He starts talking about them more affectionately. So it just goes to show how he isn't one of those people that remain stagnant. He's a person that is willing to forsake his past beliefs in order to grow as a person.
I mean, well, probably not like forsake, but more of like sort of like just evolve, I guess, in light of like what he
yeah.
knows. Some I don't know.
So, well, yeah, I guess that's enough talk about Brass. We've been talking to him for like 30 minutes now. How about the side characters? There's a lot of side characters. Did you guys like learn anything from them?
Well, for chapter 5, Brass's dad, Benedito, he seems to be one of the more important characters, I guess, because of his conversation. And I guess Brass like took a lot of lessons from him that day, like not just his love for writing in the future, but also his like philosophy of like making the most of scarce resources, whether it's like water, ideas, or life in general, I guess. What about you, Paolo?
So for me personally, I think I learned a lot from Jorge. He's my favorite character. Up until a certain point in the book that we all know.
Yeah.
But in that first chapter, he's like a he's like a glimmer of hope for Brass to keep on dreaming. Cause in the letter he says, "Don't open the book or don't open the paper and go on with your life." And I feel like even if you don't see an instant direct change in Brass's like mentality, I feel like it was in the back of his mind through the whole book, like subconsciously. It helped him get over his fear of death.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Well, lastly,
he's a
uh,
really cool character.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, actually, I'd like to add something, before we get into the next part. But I also really liked Anna's character. Like, she was this like, she kind of like re-sparked Brass's like what do you call this? Brass's will, to live, because he was really in a really bad spot before Anna came into his life. And I think like that's really admirable how like she's like she's like what do you call this, she's so loving, she's so kind, she's so faithful to her husband. And like even when what do you call this, even when one of the chapters showcases Anna like alone in the house because she's waiting for Brass to like arrive from like a really long trip. And despite all of that, she was always checking, she was always looking for if whether where he was. And she rarely doubted that he would come back. And she was right. And the only reason he couldn't respond was because he died. And
In that
I just find it
chapter,
really
yeah.
admirable how faithful she is.
Right. Well, I think Daytripper also like really emphasizes the ephemeral nature of life in general. I mean, like you remember what I said earlier. We don't really have like the most time or the most resources like on this planet, and so like if we really want to leave a mark on this world, we have to try our best to make every moment count. And I guess try to impact as much people as possible, so that a part of us, well, positively, so that a part of us or a part of our identity is sort of like remembered when we're long gone in this ever-changing world. So yeah, I guess that's
Wow, really deep words. Yeah. All right. Well, do you guys have anything to add?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I hope you guys to give it a chance to pick it up because it's
Yep.
really good. But besides that, yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Three Bookworms One Pod, and we hope you learned something today. Please check out their socials, and we'll see you next episode.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching.
Bye.